I don't know. I just don't buy it. I just really don't buy it. All right, guys, so the podcast I had done with Dr. John Jaquish, like I said in my previous video, I think it's obviously going to be a controversial one. So this is his book, Weightlifting is a Waste of Time. They were kind enough to send it to me. So they had reached out, by they I mean John's team, had reached out asking if I had wanted to have him on the podcast. I was kind of surprised because he has a lot of followers. I think he's somewhere like 900,000 followers on Instagram. So I figured, why not? You know, as I mentioned in the podcast, inherently with podcasts, there's an exchange, right? So in this case, he gets to go on podcasts and more people find out about what he is selling. And as the podcaster, I get to have somebody with a big following. Now, there are some people who I just simply wouldn't have on. However, in this case, he is somebody I'd seen mentioned maybe once or twice before in other videos. And of course, the first thought I have is like, this is just a con artist. Like, what is he selling? Obviously, to say weightlifting is a waste of time seems ridiculous. So sure, I'll have him on and, you know, let me know what you guys think. But I think I didn't go super easy on him. I think I brought up things I would really want to know. You know, why can't you just use regular bands? How is this any different? You know, what about studies showing that X, Y, or Z is just as good or even better? And so I thought the podcast was interesting with him. As far as the system itself, you know, so I'll talk some good things first. I think, first of all, you have mechanical tension. You have loading on the muscle. So for people who don't know, he has this system, and it's basically a metal bar that can attach to bands. Now, I understand that he's going to talk about the science behind it and why it is superior. I think it's hard to convince me that it's really better than just doing the same with bands. And I will say, he even did note himself that in theory, you could create similar benefits in the gym. If you had a barbell and you loaded the bands, his argument is that you would need a lot of bands to do that. I mean, there are some very strong bands that are sold out there. You look at like Elite FTS and things like that. They have very strong bands. You can get a lot of band tension. But there's a reason that those guys don't just use bands all the time. You know, I mean, if anything, in the powerlifting community, people have kind of gotten away from as much of the band and chain work. But I certainly think that it will work, you know, because again, you have mechanical loading. And I do think, like, let's say you're new to the gym or new to working out, I think that the system would work because you're going to have noob gains and you're able to progress, right? You can progress in your reps, your volume, and then as you get stronger and stronger, you can go up to the different band tensions and you can basically add load there. And again, progressive overload, it's going to work. And so the other thing about it that's nice is it's very compactable. You can kind of bring it wherever you want. It's pretty light. And so if you are on the road, you know, you just want something that's convenient, you can do that. And I don't see any reason why somebody couldn't get a good workout with it. So in that sense, I'm all for it. You know, if you want to spend the money and you want to do a home workout, I think you're fine to do that. However, for $500, you can also get a lot of weights at home. Now, it's more cumbersome, for sure. But you could get, if you're new to training, I mean, you can get 300 pounds for probably about $300, spend the other $200 on like a barbell, maybe adjustable dumbbells. You know, I've got a pretty good setup back here with just some adjustable dumbbells. So something like this, you know, this was like $30 on eBay. Got this when the shutdowns were happening. I've got a few hundred pounds of weights. It's been super convenient. And for me, I'm always going to favor that over just something like band tension. Regardless of the type of bands, the principles are the same. You know, it's going to have a lower tension, and then it's going to increase in tension as the bands expand and are pulled further. So I don't think there's really anything magical about that. I certainly don't think it's superior for muscle growth, and I don't think it's ever been shown in any studies. Now, I could be wrong there. I certainly haven't seen every study. To be honest with you, I haven't read through the whole book. I got it like a day before, you know, they shipped it to me. I got it a day or two before our interview. But I'm not aware of any studies showing that it's actually superior. You know, he also talks a lot about how constant tension is super important, and, you know, you have the lowering of myostatin in response to this hypoxic effect. Again, as I mentioned in the podcast, you have a lowering of myostatin in response to weight training in general. That's one of the mechanisms by which weight training increases muscle growth, is by inhibiting myostatin. Myostatin inhibits muscle growth. So when you inhibit an inhibitor, you get the stimulus. So like I said, I'm not really familiar with anything showing that. You know, the only way we could really have a study that I think would really kind of shut this down would be if you had a group of maybe 10 subjects using the system, and then another 10 subjects doing one set to failure with traditional weights and similar exercises, and then you had maybe another group doing 3 sets with traditional exercises, because in that case you could say, the direct comparison would be the 1 set, and then just the fact that he is saying you only need 1 set, I think would be very debatable. Again, if you're new to training, which is probably who he's targeting, I know he's not saying that that's who he's targeting, but in reality, who is buying this system? Do we really think that people who are lifting for 10 plus years seriously in the gym are all of a sudden switching to this system? I very much doubt it. I think this is probably going to appeal to the people who are, either 0 to 2 years into training, or maybe they were just a casual gym goer. They see this jacked guy, and they think, wow, look at these results, and there's science behind it, and so science, it'll work. And so those are the people who are going to buy it. And I think those people, if this increases their motivation, and they're thinking, okay, I'm going to be able to do this, just 1 set per muscle group, that's great. They're probably going to see progress. I don't think anything like the claims of 20 pounds of muscle in 6 months, but they're probably going to see progress. And again, I think regardless of what he says the target audience is, I think that's really who the target audience is. It's the people who are new to training, or have been casual gym goers for a while. So I did go and watch some YouTube videos of people performing the exercises, particularly actually him performing the exercises, and I'm sure that because it's a demo video, he is maybe exaggerating, but you would see him exercise, and then when he's done, I think there's definitely some acting going on. He was doing a squat with, really not a lot of tension. Actually, the squat is probably the one I'd have one of the biggest issues with. That and the bench press looked very awkward, to try to bench press with bands as you're just standing up, I thought looked very awkward. Like as I'm watching the videos, because I didn't watch them until after our podcast, so in my head during the podcast, I'm like, okay, maybe I'm trying to visualize it. And then when I actually watched him do the exercises, it really, my honest opinion is that it seemed very gimmicky, which I don't think anybody watching this is probably surprised to hear me say. But yeah, it just seemed very gimmicky. I'm watching this like 240-pound guy who's probably used quite a lot of supplements and had a lot of time in a traditional gym in his life, standing there with these bands, just kind of pushing them against his body. And I'm just like, I don't know. I just don't buy it. I just really don't buy it. Especially like with the squat setup, you have to get down to the bar and almost like curl it up and then start doing your squats. And it's like, dude, if you're a 400 plus pound squatter, how are you going to get down and curl this weight up and then have there still be significant tension in the bottom range of motion? You could tell that in these videos of his demonstrating it, that it was very easy for him to do these squats, and that he was nowhere remotely close to failure. That he wasn't even doing full range of motion. And that's another thing you'll see. I'm just thinking more and more as I talk here. You watch them do the bench press with it, and they're standing up, and they only come to like here, and then they stop. So I'm like, why are they not doing full range of motion? The reason is because if they were to bring it all the way back, there'd be zero tension and the band would just fall. It's like, in order to even have any tension, you have to be like here, because once you came back here, it would just fall down. So you're like just actually doing partial ranges of motion. He talked about the rows, how because there's a different force curve. That's one of the points that I brought up. There was a different force curve with the rows. And his whole argument for these other movements is that, well, if you take a bench press or a squat, you're stronger in lockout. So that's why this system is superior. And then he says, well, for rows where that's not the case, well, then you want really, a lot of mid-range reps. And I'm thinking, so basically it's not superior at all for a row. You're just saying, well, let's use it this way so that it is at least better. In which case you could apply that to anything. If you're saying weight training is inferior, then let's just modify it so that you're doing, let's say, less range of motion in the bottom and then more at the top. You could just, going off the top of my head, you could just say, okay, we'll start a traditional bench press with a barbell, go in full range of motion, and then as that tires out, you'll just do partials at the top. It's not a new concept to try to go to full fatigue. There's just also no evidence that the muscle fibers are not going to be fully fatigued with traditional weight training and full range of motion. So the last point that I think is maybe the most important point is, what is this guy getting after? And that I think is important because there are people out there who are just ignorant to what they're saying, meaning that they are good intentioned people and they're just wrong because maybe they're not completely up to date on the science, or they're, whatever. But they really believe what they're saying. And you actually get that quite a lot. I think a lot of people who are spreading misinformation, whether that's on eating disorders or how to gain muscle and lose fat or all of that, a lot of these people are saying the wrong things, but they want to help. In this situation, I have to say, I think this guy, Dr. John Jaquish, is an intelligent guy. I don't think this is just like some dumb meathead who doesn't know what he's talking about. I think he's intelligent, which means I think he's intelligent enough to know that a lot of this is maybe not so true. That some of it is BS, that you didn't gain all that muscle through band training, and that most people are not going to be able to maximize their muscle mass with this sort of system. And that's kind of where I think it's, problematic. Now, I had a good interaction with John. We had some good back and forth. He was fun to talk to. He was open to my questions that maybe put him on the spot a little bit. But my interpretation is that it is misleading. And even just the way that some of the conversation went. Like, so for example, I mentioned my mentor, Dr. Nicholas Radamus. He referenced him as Nick several times and said, "Oh yeah, I know Nick. Well, I talked to Nick later that day and the next day, and he said he does not know him. I said, "Do you know this guy, Dr. John Jaquish?" He said, "No, I don't know him." So it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, there's enough stuff where I just kind of feel like you're misleading. So those are my honest thoughts on it. I could be wrong. Maybe it's an amazing system. If you have used the system, let me know. Let me know how it's going for you. But that's just my honest opinion here. So obviously I want to be forthcoming in what I thought. And also let me know how you feel about guests like that. I think a lot of us want honest and like the best information we can get. But I also think that sometimes it's just interesting to talk to people. So for example, Dr. Oz, I think there's a lot that he puts out there that I disagree with. But if somebody, if his team reached out to me and said, "Hey, Dr. Oz wants to come on the podcast," I'm probably going to talk to Dr. Oz because, it's an interesting opportunity. I think some of the podcast is really informational. I think sometimes it's just fun to see interesting conversations. But let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you think about this video and the podcast in general. Thanks.
This video's great. I wish I could show my appreciation for this video. I wish I could respond to it somehow, or be notified in the future when this channel updates, because it's so great. But I don't think there's a way I can do any of those things.
Remember to like, comment, and subscribe!
Oh!